Hello, welcome back to the InsTech podcast. Zoya here, and this week Matthew Grant is joined by Richard Gunn. Rich has been with hyperexponential since its earliest days, and he's now leading their fast-growing US operation from Brooklyn. In this episode, he talks candidly about scaling from 5 people to more than 220, building culture across continents, and what it really takes to win in the US insurance market. We also dive into how HX is reshaping pricing, triage, and portfolio intelligence, plus the practical ways AI and Asian technologies are already changing underwriting, product development, and go-to-market teams. If you've been wondering how carriers can stay profitable in softening markets, what vibe coding actually means in real life, or how a UK-born InsurTech becomes by the markets for the market in the US, well, you're going to want to keep listening. So settle in, pour yourself a coffee, and enjoy the conversation.
Richard, great to be talking to you. Last time we met, we were actually in a pub in London. This time you're on the other side of the world, but great to have you on board for a discussion.
Likewise, good to be here and dialing in from New York.
Well, we're British, so we have to talk about the weather. What's it like in New York just now?
Very true to form. It's suddenly become winter, I would say, in New York, which I actually quite like. I like the fact that New York commits to each of its seasons, and it's definitely committing to winter now. It was snowing yesterday, having been kind of t-shirt or light jumper weather beforehand. So, yeah, there's my stereotypical British introduction about the weather. Thank you for teeing me up, Matthew.
Well, we're also delighted to get you back. We've had 4 episodes, pretty much over the history of the company, actually. You had Amrit Santhosan, your co-founder, back in 2019, episode 52, and then he came back in 2023. And then we had Marcus Rue, who was, or still is, a partner at Battery Ventures, talking about why they invested in you last year. And we kind of complete the circle with having you on today. So a lot to catch up on, I think, in a fast-moving company. And also, given your successful fundraising in the past, it'd be great to hear how things are going.
Yeah, no, great to be here. And a lot has changed. I joined 7 years ago, but as a business, we had our 8th birthday last Friday in London.
You've been with the company 7 years. You went to the 8th birthday party. So you joined 1 year into the company. How big was HX then when you joined?
So I think I was the 5th person to join HX. I was the first non-engineering hire. So broadly, my role was to work alongside the founders. So I was there as we were working out kind of what product market fit looked like, I guess, and how to sell it. One of my kind of early kind of projects, if you will, at HX was to apply for the Lloyd's Lab back in the day and to take us through that program. And then, since then, we were able to find product market fit and sell to a few customers. And my role has kind of evolved as a result of that.
And how many people today in the company?
220 something, 221, I think, on the last count. So, yeah.
It's a lot of change. And as you said, in 7 years, and we'll talk a little bit about your own personal experience, but you're heading up the US operation out there now. I think last time we spoke, you had 20 people out there in the US on the ground. Obviously a big market for you.
Yeah, that's right. So I moved over here a year ago and started building out a US team. 2 of the hardest things to get right when you expand into a new geography. 1 is to get the culture right, and 2 is to win your first customer. And mercifully, we had a little bit of an unfair advantage on winning your first customer because we were able to sell to some large US carriers from the UK, particularly through COVID, kind of decreased the geographical kind of barrier there. And I moved over to start building out a US pod, start building out a US team. And over the last 12 months, have scaled that to about 20 people. We are continuing to hire, which is exciting and exhausting. But I'm now based over here, based down in Brooklyn in New York.
We'll come back to the experience of moving to the US and compare and contrast to the UK. But we should just baseline it. Hyperexponential HX was initially known as a pricing platform. I know you've expanded a bit since then. So how do you just describe yourself in terms of what problem you're solving for your clients today?
Yeah, sure. So you're right. We are kind of most commonly known for our pricing and rating capabilities. Our mission has always remained consistent over the last 8 years. Lots of things have changed, but our mission hasn't, which is to build the decision infrastructure for the insurance ecosystem. And that started with majoring on pricing and rating in terms of the problems that we look to solve for, and we kind of broaden our aperture of how we try and help insurers now. It's really around winning the right risks, making better pricing decisions, and then maximizing portfolio profit. So everywhere from ingestion through to quote, and then subsequent kind of portfolio optimization. So that's seen our product capabilities, even over the last 12 months alone, evolve from just the pricing and rating capability that many of our customers know us for, towards having triage as well as portfolio intelligence capabilities on the kind of the back end of that decision-making process, as well as releasing a whole host of AI capabilities and AI agents to kind of sit on top of that decision infrastructure.
And how do people buy from you? Is it still the pricing platform? Is it, you have to buy the pricing platform and they buy the add-ons, or are the add-ons something people can get in their own right?
So it will depend on what their current pain points are. So we might have clients who initially want to solve for some of their ingestion and triage, or are more focused just on the pricing. One of our kind of key differentiators is the fact that we can surface up some of that pricing and rating logic at the point of triage. So typically we do have early conversations around how that can sit at the center of your ecosystem. Ultimately, we'll work with customers and understand what their priorities are and focus on that.
There's so many choices now for companies who they can work with. I mean, also choices about, do they go with organizations like yourself, now semi-established, meaning you've been out there for 7-8 years testing it out. There's some people now coming in, good understanding of generative AI, agentic AI, but don't really understand insurance. They can build it themselves. My sense is you sort of fit in the middle there somewhere, which is you've got a track record, you can help people grow, but they're not risking it by starting off with some very smart people that haven't really got understanding of insurance. You've got some smart people and you've built the business now, and now you're responding to the needs to sort of grow beyond that original core functionality, just up and down the work stream. Is that a fair way of characterizing it?
Yeah, I would. A key way that we've differed to other solutions in the market right from day dot is we refer to ourselves sometimes as a pro code platform. So you can log on to our platform and you can operate in an IDE, a development environment, where you can actually code and build your own triage, pricing, rating, or portfolio intelligence tools. And therefore, we try to position ourselves as kind of the best of both in terms of build, v-buy to that point there, because you have the flexibility that the specialty and large commercial market demands in terms of being able to engineer for your own edge cases as a specific insurer, reinsurer, or MGA. But then you have that kind of enterprise credibility and confidence from sitting on a platform which has been tried and tested. We have, I think, 60 different clients now, collectively writing over $50 billion of premium on our platform. So there's lots of kind of performance edge cases that have been uncovered and had to be fixed in the meantime. So we can give customers that confidence around the enterprise grade engineering, but they can still kind of build their own capabilities on top of it.
60 clients, it's actually really impressive. I mean, a lot of companies get stuck, for those that are familiar with the technology adoption curve, or Jeff Moore's point about crossing the chasm, where you can be ready for early adopters, but the early majority don't really want to take the risk. I mean, you're definitely now into mainstream with 60 companies. What's the balance between those that are in the UK where you started off versus in the US?
Yeah, good question. Our largest customer base is already in the US. So about 40% of the premium that's priced on our platform each year is US premium. And that's kind of reflected in how many customers we have in the US as well. That's in part because we were able to sell into the US from the UK very effectively, but also reflects just how much premium there is in the US market. So when you sell to some of the clients that we can name, the likes of Sompo, Munich Re, Markel, all US carriers, or recently sold to Bowhead, for example, started partnering with them, just allows you just to build a lot of traction very quickly.
Some great names. And I'm guessing coming originally out of the UK and specifically London market, where there's a whole different range of lines of business being written, that you've either had to, or you've been sort of chosen to be very flexible about what lines of business can be run through the tool.
Yeah, it's almost like we look at it as kind of two ends of complexity, and we started at one of the most complex ends, which is the specialty Lloyd's and London market, and are moving down that complexity curve towards solving more for mid-market. And kind of we've got some clients now starting to use us for some of their flow underwriting in the SME space, for example. So we see that as very much one of our strengths, starting that high underwriting touch, complex lines, and then how do you bring that down to a higher volume business rather than having to solve for it the other way. So that meant it was very natural for us in the first instance to land in the E&S space in the US market. So we initially started to work with carriers in that space, and then we've in the last year released some more product capabilities for the admitted lines, which are more likely to have a slightly different kind of and more predictable approach to pricing, and recently released an admitted market product as well, so that we could start to support clients in that space.
Wow, so full coverage. So just for those that don't speak insurance, the E&S is the excess and surplus lines, which are non-admitted, but essentially the kind of risks that the admitted insurance carriers, which is the kind of mainstream ones who have to get their rates agreed, will choose not to write. So you're kind of going across the whole gamut from the massive admitted insurance companies where I've potentially got a very good relationship with them, with all the kind of quirky, difficult to underwrite price, but also needed and quite successful. So you've definitely kind of made your mark on the mainstream. And what advice for people that are currently still in the UK and looking to how they grow into the US? Because ultimately any company, particularly any company that wants to grow or is funded, is going to need to move outside of the UK at some point. Were you successful at selling into the US when you didn't have an office in the US?
You could probably approach that through two different lenses. One is from a product and one is from a go-to-market perspective. From a product perspective, what we absolutely found the best approach was to go through your customers. And the benefit of the insurance market is that many of the large global players are exactly that. They're global. So you may have landed in Europe, for example, they're likely to have a US operation as well. And therefore, if you can demonstrate success with their European counterparts, that'll give you an opportunity to start to demonstrate how you can support them in the US, and at least to get that feedback. We lean into the notion of design partners, so we'll bring clients on as design partners as we build out new product capabilities. So rather than taking the approach of let's build it and hopefully they will come, let's build it with them so we know that it'll at least meet the needs of our existing customer base. So that's one approach. That's the kind of lowest path to expansion from a product perspective. From a go-to-market, it's a mix. We actually found very interestingly, and almost the opposite of many startups, potentially outside of the insurance space and other like hyper-verticalized businesses, we actually found it easier to sell to the Excel global players. And not exactly sure why that is, but my hypothesis is because people working at very large global players are used to speaking with Europeans who maybe are using slightly different nomenclature when they're talking about the underwriting journey than they are when they're speaking to Americans. One of the most obvious ones in our space is pricing and rating mean different things each side of the pond, for example. And actually a big learning for me and my team over the last year was actually understanding how to look and sound American when selling to the non-global players. So to selling to still very, very large, very material insurers, reinsurers and MGAs, they might write multi-billion dollars of premium, but they aren't inherently a global business. They just sell into the US market. And I do wonder sometimes whether, it's almost been a bit of a social learning for me that if you look and sound the same as someone, people are looking reasons to qualify you in. Whereas if you look and sound different, it just kind of seems, and I'm feeding off anecdata here rather than actual data, but it seems like people are more akin to looking for a reason to qualify you out. And so it's actually been, like from a product perspective, we found we achieved what you'd call product market fit very fast, but to sell to the kind of mass market, if you will, kind of anywhere below the Excel players in the US market, it's been really important to build out a US team and actually to invest in our product marketing. So we very much look and feel American. And a key part of doing that as well has not just been building a team here, but also making sure that our executive team are also Americans. We're hiring experienced insurance practitioners from the US, and we now refer to ourselves as dual headquartered because half of our executive team are based in the US and many of them are Americans. And we've been hiring out kind of pricing actuaries, underwriters and brokers, etc. in this team to make sure that we can truly say we're by the market, for the market, but from a US perspective and not just a UK one.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of really valuable advice in there. I mean, I completely agree with what I've seen. And to some extent, it's a kind of level of commitment. I'd say those bigger companies are also used to working with earlier stage companies, or they're kind of, if not bleeding edge, certainly leading edge, and they'll kind of look anywhere in the world for the solution. But when you start to go into that, back into that early majority on the curve again, a big part of it is they want the confidence that whoever they're dealing with is going to be there. And that, to me, is a lot about where the sort of local accent, local people come from. Understand, it's just easier to understand. It's easier to communicate when things go wrong. It's always very interesting. I think we can all do our best to communicate with people that are not from the same country from when things are going well. But what really differentiates is when something's not going well. How do you manage that? So I can see lots of reasons, and I think one of the advantages of having that funding you had last year is to be able to commit to be in the US, which in turn generates its own growth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was a very intentional move to bring on US-based investors for exactly that. Both the advisors they bring, it's also been very critical for hiring talent as well, particularly with the kind of evolution of AI and many top talent looking to go towards what's the top startup from an AI perspective. It's like by having those investors on the cap table, building out agentic capabilities for the insurance space, then you can compete for some of the top talent. It would have been very hard being just a British company bootstrapped, looking to expand into the US and attract some of the kind of top talent in this space.
We'll talk about AI in a minute, of course, but I just want to, have you discovered the difference between the way the US use the word quite and the way we use that in Britain? Do you know the difference?
I don't think I do, actually. I'm concerned I'm about to learn that in a number of meetings I got a completely wrong interpretation, so I'm definitely keen to learn it.
That's possible, but actually it's a positive outcome. So it took me 15 years of working for Americans to realize this. So in Britain, when we say something's quite good, it sort of plays down and is almost a way of politely saying, I don't think it's any good. If an American says quite good, they actually mean it's really good. So when people are saying to you, Richard, we think your product or whatever is quite good, you can take some hope from the fact that actually they're being positive, not sort of just being polite to tell you they don't really like it. So yeah, look out for that one. It took me a while to figure it out. And once I'd figured it out, although bizarrely, of course, for our American listeners, when someone in Britain goes, it's really quite good, we actually mean the same as you do in America, meaning it is really good. So yeah, two countries divided by a common language, I think Oscar Wilde said.
Yeah, I've heard that before, and I can relate to that. When we were first expanding into the US, one of our investors, he's a director, he shared a kind of some kind of data that they'd analysed, I think at just a kind of the VC portfolio level, and it was looking at expansion from the US into the UK and from the US into Japan. And the likelihood of success is actually higher going from the US into Japan. And it was like, the theory is that because when you're expanding to the Japan, you know it's going to be very different. You know that you're going to likely need a JV or a partner. You know that they speak a different language. It's very clear they speak a very different language. Their markets work differently. So you approach it through that lens. Whereas people take for granted when they expand from the US into the UK that they speak the same language. It's broadly the same market. And therefore we'll be successful just by pattern matching what we've learned in the US. And that's something I've tried to internalize over the last year, tried to force myself to reiterate our operating model, reiterate how we kind of approach the market, think about things from 0 to 1, kind of first principles, to make sure we don't fall into that trap.
And I mean, you've got not just the work experience, but you've taken your family over there. How's that going for all of you, having to adjust with young children to living into a different part of the world?
It's been fun, for sure. A 4-year-old and a 3-year-old and another on the way. And we live down in Brooklyn. So some people in New York would say, therefore, I'm not living in the real New York. And some people would say, I am living in the real New York. Although I'm down in Park Slope, so I don't think that can be kind of considered edgy Brooklyn by any means. One benefit that I found from New York, and maybe this is just being an expat, and most of my experience as an expat is in New York, and therefore I'm just applying it to that. But it feels like there's quite a lot of transient communities in New York, which makes it much easier to actually make friends and build a network. And so found it, unsurprisingly, found myself hanging out with a lot of other people who have intersection with insurance and technology, having moved to New York. But that's part of the fun of it.
Let's come back to the AI. So we're trying to make this real because everyone's talking about the topic, but can we drill down to what a difference it makes? There's one application you had that I was really fascinated by, which is not so much core business, but helps you run the business, which is your use of Gong, which is a tool that you use to, as I understand it, to listen into the conversations, or I mean, they initiate it, but your sales team is having, and then the tool actually scores people on the quality of the conversations they're having and actually records the information, obviously with the client's permission or prospective client. But I'd love to learn a bit more about that because it sounds very intriguing and it's a very practical application of the use of some of the new tools coming out.
Yeah, so unsurprisingly, we have put a big emphasis on how we can leverage AI internally. I would refer to Amrit as who's our CEO and co-founder, as an AI maximalist. And we internalized very early on kind of the mantra that you need to work out how to leverage AI better and faster than your customers and your competitors. And if you do, you will win. And if you don't, you will lose. And kind of that is what motivates me to make sure that we're not just thinking about how do we build agentic capabilities for our clients to use, but also how do we use them internally? Because if we can be 10 times more effective as a business, then we can deliver much more value for our clients. So specific to Gong in the go-to-market function or the revenue function, that's quickly become kind of table stakes to have some form of recording capability and then leverage AI to evaluate how those calls are going and how you can improve. Some of the areas that we look to do that, like one is to support forecasting, for example, because you can scan those scripts and identify where you should have more confidence. And maybe we'll add some weighting now based on the words that they use in New York versus in London, thanks to your guidance there. One area that we've recently built out, which is really, really cool, actually, we have business value consulting capability. So that's about working with our clients to, first of all, understand the value that they should get from our platform. And then once we bring them on as a customer, we'll go through business value planning. So what's the most effective way to bring value to the business as fast as possible? And then we'll do a BVR, business value realization. So a year on, did you get the value that you expected from our platform? And if not, how do we need to approach it differently? And we've now found a way that we can pull our early conversation transcripts from actuaries, from underwriters, actually into Claude code, and then use that to create the first version of a business value report. And so rather than saying, right, I now need to book in time with your underwriters and your actuaries, we can actually say, look, we've listened to our first 5 hours of speaking with you as a prospect. We know we're moving towards a kind of a proof of concept or a proof of value. But just to give you a high level, based on the pain points you've surfaced and our view of benchmarks across our 60 customers, this is the level of impact that a project like hyperexponential might be able to have. Does that align with your expectations? Does that surprise you? What are we missing? Because obviously we'll be missing stuff at that point. We're not going to solve for it all without a specific kind of project related to it. And that's just a great example where previously, like, we built a team of many ex-McKinsey and other kind of Big Four strategy consultants who would have spent hours and hours around that. And now we can run that out very quickly, and they can spend their time actually challenging it, seeing where the gaps are, and making sure it's specific to an insurer or reinsurer rather than a more generic report, because you're spending a lot of your hours just doing the heavy lifting.
I'm glad you mentioned that point about pain points, because no surprise, it sort of goes back to Amrit's background. When he was an actuary, he'd also computer engineer, software engineer, so he could write code. And as I understand from him, there's some things he wanted to do, couldn't do it when he was working for an insurance company, and built a company to solve it. And actually, interestingly, we've got a webinar coming up with one of the large US insurers, and they're asking them how they deploy AI. And they look for where people are complaining. When they get a complaint from somebody about they can't do something, they go, right, okay, can we deploy an AI solution here to solve that problem? And what I think is fascinating is at one level, we're sort of hearing about companies still struggling to articulate the large investments in AI, but actually in the companies themselves, I think you're a great example of this, are people finding solutions to actually just create that efficiency at the operational level. But then I'm sure you're also finding ways to accelerate both the development and what you're offering to your clients with the HX tools themselves. Is there anything there you just want to draw attention to that is tapping into large language models or agentic AI or other ways of just improving that experience?
Yeah, I'll probably try and tie the two together. So what we find interesting is you have the approach where you're looking for specific pain points and you solve for them leveraging AI. And that kind of brings people on the journey, has some quick wins, and generates an immediate ROI, or hopefully, depending on which kind of report you read. But then there's also a question that we ask ourselves is, where's there an opportunity to redraw the traditional boundaries of different roles or different capabilities as a result of the evolving capabilities of AI? So this is something we ask ourselves a lot in the context of actuaries, underwriters, and IT. Like, even pre-Gen AI, a key area that we looked to add value was to bring together those key stakeholders around a risk and allow them to huddle and iterate on a risk in a way that's very hard to do if you haven't got the right kind of fluid level of technology that sits in between. And so it's so important to do in the Lloyd's and London market in particular, as well as kind of broadly across the commercial P&C space. But we see it outside of insurance as well. So if I think about our product org, very traditionally you have 3 key stakeholders huddling around a product development, if you will. You have the product team, you'll have the design team, who'll focus more on the UI and the UX, and then you have the engineering team who actually build it and then will subsequently support it. And we're seeing with the evolution of AI and kind of enterprise-grade vibe coding, if you will, or enabling you to push something through to semi-production much faster than you could beforehand, those 3 roles consolidating into what's being sometimes referred to as a builder. And that's also exciting because you can start to think around, maybe we can have one of our customer success managers who works very closely with one of our clients. And maybe you're one of our clients and you say, like, Richard, I've got some challenges with my experience rating and the triangles and how they currently work. I've seen it work in this way more effectively. And if you and I could mock that up and then I could push that straight through to a builder who could actually flow that through to the code, you can suddenly see that the feedback and the iterative nature of working closely with the clients and at the coalface and how you feed that into your product could really accelerate. So it's a challenge that I'm asking myself on the go-to-market side too. Like, should we be seeing the advent of the first full stack AE account executive who can support on the customer success side as well as the technical engineering side? Or actually, are we just going to see kind of the opposite of that point of view, would be that keep our areas of specialization, be able to see much more productivity for each of the stakeholders. So where you have a solutions engineer, could they support 5 clients rather than 2 clients, or 10 clients rather than 5 clients? And could an account executive, because you've got agent doing a lot of the administrative work, could they carry a much bigger quota, or could they support more clients as well? So there's a lot of kind of testing and learning on that. Lots of very healthy challenge from VCs around benchmarks that they're seeing around productivity at the same time as speed. And we're excited both in terms of how we can hopefully put that in the hands of our clients with some of the agentic capabilities that we've been releasing, but also internally at HX, how can we use it all the way from product and engineering through to go to market.
Richard, before we leave that, can you just talk a bit more about vibe coding? Because you mentioned it in passing, and my sense is that is going to be a major part of what every person needs to think about in their career going forward. And I'll let you explain what vibe coding is, but as a concept, and I think you touched on it there in a very interesting sort of career development point of view. People score themselves either to people that can handle technology and they're going to stick their hands in and play around with it, and those that can't. I think what you're saying is that not, and I'm trying to putting words into your mouth, but the technology is not going to totally replace everybody. I mean, you talk about digital or bionic AE, maybe it will, not an underwriting for sure, but you kind of have to have your bionic arm and your tools that are going to help you. So it'd be helpful just to talk a little bit more about vibe coding. And again, if there's anything specific you can recommend to anybody who has sort of heard about it or wants to try it, but is not quite sure where to start, that would be fantastic as well.
Yeah, there's been an undulation of reporting around vibe coding in the news. And unsurprisingly, many of the kind of podcasts that I listen to, turns out they're actually funded by some of the big kind of providers in the space. So I think like the most recent wave before recording this was about whether or not vibe coding was dying. And then I think it's Lovable reported that 5x'd their users over the course of the last 2 to 3 months. And so I won't try and kind of predict that. What the reflections I would have is like vibe coding is ill-defined in terms of how it's being used. But as I understand, or at least as I use the terminology, it's often about allowing a non-technical user or someone who historically wouldn't have jumped into the zeros and ones of code to be able to, in natural language or in a low-code, no-code interface, be able to very quickly spin up either, and the vibe coding definition will probably more likely lend itself to either mock up a quick kind of proof of value or kind of illustration of what it could look like, all the way through to, and I think where we will certainly see it resolving to, is actually production grade websites which you can use. And like a lot of the work and the development that's going on now is around actually how can you make it that code which is written by agents versus written by humans, either at the hands of a sophisticated engineer or a non-technical user, how can they actually be greater in terms of the security and their performance than if they were coded by a human? That's where it starts to get exciting, because it goes from like the quick wins now are that illustration I gave beforehand. Can you have a customer success manager who's inherently going to be less technical than an engineer working with a customer to mock up what an iteration of your product could look like, and then feed it back into that builder role who does have engineering capabilities, towards actually that customer success manager mocking it up, running it through some programmatic testing in partnership with an agent, and then actually committing that for review. And I think there'll be like a spectrum of use cases there.
So Richard, we covered a lot in there, lots of useful angles. What's going to be happening in the next 12 months? What should we come back and talk about with you or one of your colleagues in November of 26? Sure.
So I think one thing we're already seeing from a market perspective, or from to kind of set the scene or the context, is there's certainly pockets of the market which are softening. I know that's unequal, particularly globally. And so what we're seeing is a movement from growth through to profitability. We run an annual survey around the state of pricing and underwriting. And historically, when we would survey underwriters, they would often kind of reflect that one of the number one pain points related to kind of access to data would be around rekeying or speed. And one of the top ones that came out this time was actually real-time portfolio view, which clearly shows a shift of mindset towards thinking about profitability and where they're deploying the capital rather than how quickly can they deploy their capital. So I think that's one thing that I expect us to do a lot more, is less emphasis on speed. Speed is important, but it's very quickly become table stakes. Like, how can you solve for ingestion, leveraging Gen AI so that you're not wasting time on busy work, and actually around how do you use that additional time, and how do you use some of the tools out there to try and drive profitability? And it's a key area we've been focusing on, unsurprisingly, the pricing and underwriting platform. Some of our portfolio intelligence capabilities look to tackle that directly. I expect you to hear a lot more from us around how are our underwriting, actuarial and ingestion agents helping clients achieve profitability in a volatile market and certainly softening market, versus how can you just write as much risk as quickly, which has maybe been a bit more of a focus of the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, we in my previous life used to refer to it as marginal impact pricing, that ability to understand what an additional piece of business you write, how it impacts your whole portfolio. I mean, it's been hard to do it until now when the tools are out there. So that makes complete sense. And it is a really good point. I mean, efficiency only takes you so far, and you start to get sort of reducing benefits and then need to look for something new. And then finally, Richard, I find it's really helpful to get my listening or reading fix from people I'm talking to. So do you have any recommendations for a podcast or a book, or both if you feel particularly inspired to do so?
Well, I don't know about you, but I kind of flip-flop between reading business books and then looking at my Whoop stats and realizing I'm having like 1 hour of good sleep each night because I'm just lying there in bed thinking about work and strategy, and then reading books that help me go to sleep or like distract me from the day-to-day. So on the book side, I've gone through a recent flip back towards reading the books I used to read when I was traveling, when I was kind of 18 to 21. So most recently reread Papillon, which definitely distracted me from the world of insurance technology and helped me sleep. On the podcast side, one thing we're seeing is like vendors love to talk about building a partnership, but actually it's more important than ever when carriers are looking for software providers to pick the right partner who is going to help them learn and help them navigate the evolving landscape of AI and just kind of technology more broadly, because it's changing so quickly. And so a podcast that I listen to every single day is I think it's called the Daily AI Brief or the AI Daily Brief, one of those two. It just helps me give that quick soundbite about what's the latest and greatest in all news related to AI, just to make sure that kind of I'm on the forefront of that. And then obviously it's on me to do a bit more research about how that applies to kind of HX and insurance.
So congratulations having a young family, moving to the US, building a business, and still having time to read. I think you definitely get an award for that. But on that point, Richard, I'll let you go, get back to your job. Have you got a warm coat for a cold winter in New York? Because when it's cold, boy, it is cold.
Great. Well, thank you for having me as always. Hopefully we'll have good reason to have more of these conversations over the next 8 years. And thank you, everyone.
Well, if you've made it this far, then I'm pretty sure you found that as interesting as I did. The InsTech podcast comes out every Sunday morning, where we spotlight the latest news, leading voices, and freshest updates across insurance that you need to know about. If you would like to take part in these conversations, head to www.instech.co to find out how you can join our network and be a part of the insurance intelligence for the curious.